Hey everyone, this is my good friend Dan. Let's give Dan a face. That's terrifying. There we go. So, Dan and his lovely wife just recently bought their very first house together. But they weren't all that thrilled with how the numbers looked on the front. They were old and out of style, faded, and, well, practically fallen off the house. And this made Dan sad. So Dan grabbed his cell phone and figured he would give me a call. And he said, "Hey Drew, I've got a project for you." And being the awesome friend that I am, I immediately stopped fighting crime on the streets and headed over to see what Dan needed. As soon as I got there, I said, "Hey Dan, what's up?" So Dan explained to me the situation and how he and his wife would love to have a modern-looking number plaque for the front of their house. I did my best at designing something that I thought was modern-looking. I was thinking of a mahogany panel and three different colored overlapping curved hardwood inlays with, like a purple heart vertical accent. Evidently, I have no eye for design. This was just a noisy, chaotic mess, and it was no surprise that I got some raised eyebrows from them when I showed them the picture. I was told to think clean and simple, so I tried again. This time I drew up a much more simpler design. This one is a plain, light-colored maple panel, chamfered edges, offset floating numbers, and then just a single accent strip at the bottom. This time I got the thumbs up, so this is what I'll be building today. So here we go. I started off by going through all my cabinet shop discards, looking for as many of the cleanest boards that I could find. Ones without knots and mineral staining, checks, and that sort of thing. And then from those, I picked out all the ones that were the lightest in color. Then it was just a matter of picking the best of the best and figuring out how to orient them so that the different grain patterns flowed well. At the jointer, I could flatten one side of each of the boards, and then referencing that flat side against the table saw fence, I could square each one up. These are cabinet discards, so some of the boards had grooves that I had to cut off at this stage, and others just had a real gnarly edge that needed to be trimmed off. In the end, I had about 6 pair of boards that I planned on joining. Over at the miter saw, I squared off the joining ends of each pair just to make sure that the joint will be perfect. And then I started making lines for biscuits. Now this was my first time using a biscuit joiner, and I had no idea just how fun they are. In my excitement, I even neglected to attach the dust collection bag, so I ended up making a nice coating of man glitter all over the shop floor. However, it sure made things easier when it came to gluing the boards lengthwise. It held them flush when I tightened each one of them up in the clamps, and they didn't slide around at all. After the glue was dry, I re-flattened one side back on the jointer, and then I re-squared each one back up on the table saw. Now I had all I needed to make the panel, and all of the joints looked to be pretty nice and square. So I stagger the seams, and then I start drawing some lines across them for more biscuits. So you're probably asking, why are you using biscuits? And the answer is simple. I don't know. I guess I just figured that it would help me align things during glue up and potentially add more rigidity since the panel is going to be exposed to the elements outside of Dan's house. But yeah, I don't know. If it falls apart, I'll just tell Dan that it was supposed to and that I threw in that functionality for free. Then came the time for glue up. The biscuits really did help with the alignment. In fact, I didn't have to use any calling boards at all. It was kind of like putting together Legos. Each piece just snapped right into the next one. It was kind of cool. Then I used my wife's favorite scarf to clean up all the glue. And then over at the planer, it could be flattened on both sides. I didn't have to use a sled because the end pieces caught all the snipe, and that was real nice. Over at the table saw, I cut the panel to a squirtle over its final width. If you don't know that measurement term, it's just a bezel longer than a festerence. Next, I could set the fence to 2 inches and then make another cut for the accent strip. For the accent strip, I decided to go with wingay. Interesting fact about this exotic wood, it's found in the Congo jungles of Central America, and the ancient Mayans would use primitive tools to fashion it into beautiful cases for their iPhones. Once things are all dried up, I get a chance to look like I'm a real woodworker by using a hand plane and flattening the accent strip down. This was probably the most enjoyable step of the project for me, to be honest. I really like using a hand plane. Probably because there's not much to it, and it's something that my feeble brain and my sketchy hand-eye coordination can still handle. A little sanding to get everything smooth. Then I could trim the panel to its final width back at the table saw. Over at the router, I took a couple passes on each side to add the chamfer. And then the hand plane made short work of removing the burn marks that I got from the router. Just a few passes on each side and they were all gone. But I wasn't careful enough. I got a tiny piece of tear out. Luckily, it was still attached and I didn't lose it in the lake of sawdust on the floor. So I used a scribe to get in some glue in there and then just stretched a rubber band around the panel to hold it tight. I unpacked all the numbers and laid them out in a completely random order. I just figured it didn't really matter, right? I picked out a couple hanging brackets to use and then took some measurements of where I could place them where they wouldn't interfere with the posts that are used to mount the numbers. Once I had these locations marked on the back, I lined up each bracket and then just traced around it. I chiseled out a recess for each of the brackets, and then on the inside of that, I chiseled out another area for the screw heads that the plaque will be hanging on. Then I drilled a couple pilot holes for the brackets, and then the panel was ready for finish. So I put on roughly 18,000 coats of water-based poly on the front and the back. I just figured if this thing is going to be out in the hot summer and the cold winter temps, I really want it completely encased in this protective coating. The mounting posts that I got with these numbers, they were way too long for this 3/4 inch panel and they needed to be cut down. And they were just made of aluminum, so they cut real easily on my angle grinder. I had to drill out the hole for the brackets as well, so that the heads of the screws could fit through. But now with that done, I could screw on the mounting brackets onto the back of the panel, and then those are set. I taped down the placement stencils for the numbers, and then made a mark where I needed to drill for all of the mounting posts. And then I just head over to the drill press and make a bunch of holes. I squished some Greek yogurt down into the holes and then gently pressed in each of the numbers. Then, after each one, I cleaned up all the extra schmutz with some brain ticklers. And there you go. A modern, elegant, clean-looking house number plaque. I think it turned out pretty nice. And with the style of brackets that I used, it should hold pretty securely to the side of the house so that the infamous and formidable gangs of house number thieves won't have an easy time stealing this one. So Dan and I wanted to say, if you're into odd pictures and captions and hashtags, then follow me on Instagram. You can find me at Fisher's Shop. This is where Dan and I hang out, and it's pretty obvious that we're two of the coolest looking guys you'll probably ever see. So come and join us. Hey, if you liked the video, help me out and click that thumbs up button, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing. There's a lot more videos to come, and you don't want to miss out. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Didn't realize I just blasted the camera with sawdust. Time to clean you out. It's a lot easier to make a cut when the blade is up. Moron. Jeez, the whole time the clamp was in the way. Well, that stinks, because I already did the other one. Oh well. I gotta rotate this thing, get it facing forward, and then I can, what? Oops.